Hello, America, and welcome to the podcast for Christians United for God and Country and the United States Prayer Force. I'm Steve D, along with Pastor Vince. It is another Saturday, and we're happy to be here. We've got a lot of things to talk about, as we usually do, and we're glad to have you listening. This is, as you well know, we're a few days away from the election that just took place and the re-election of President Donald J. Trump as the 47th president of the United States. Pastor Vince has something interesting to talk about in just a few minutes. He's going to talk about another president who had two terms in office separated by one in the middle. And you know, that's how Donald Trump is, how his career has taken place in the White House. He was our 45th president, and then we had number 46, which was not a lucky number for America. We had Joe Biden in the middle. And then now the 47th president of the United States will be Donald Trump. Donald Trump is an enigma in this country. It is amazing. And as Christians, we look at him, I think, in slightly different ways than much of America does. We tend to be a little more forgiving and a little more gracious in regards to some of the things that Donald Trump has said and done. And there is out there something known as Trump derangement syndrome. Trump derangement syndrome, it's technically a derogatory term to some degree, but it's used to describe a form of toxic criticism and negative reaction to President Trump's statements and political actions. The origin of the term can be traced back to a political columnist and commentator. You probably remember Charles Krauthammer from back in the day, right? He was technically a medical man in the beginning before he became a newscaster. He was a psychiatrist, they say, but he first coined the phrase when George Bush was president. He said Bush derangement syndrome took place in 2023. Trump derangement syndrome is Trump-induced general hysteria that is produced and has produced an inability to distinguish between legitimate policy differences and signs of what some people think are psychological pathology in the case of the president. There was a journalist by the name of Fareed Zakaria, and he defined Trump derangement syndrome as hatred of President Trump so intense that it impairs people's judgment. Now that makes a lot of sense because we've seen some very strange judgment going on amongst those on the left side of the political spectrum, those who consider themselves to be Democrats. Now, Pastor Vince and I have talked about this for many weeks, and we've thought about it, and we think we've come to the conclusion that there's a deep spiritual deficit going on in America right now in the lives of many people. The spiritual deficit has blinded the perception of so many people in regards to right and wrong. Interesting, something that occurred recently when these hurricanes were hitting Florida. There was a Federal Emergency Management Agency supervisor who was telling the relief workers down there in Florida to avoid homes that had signs that supported President Trump. And this is true. It's been confirmed by the FEMA organization there. Avoid homes advertising Trump. This lady's name was Marnie Washington. And she conveyed her command verbally, and she also put it into a Microsoft Teams chat when she was speaking to relief workers. Now, that is a real clear evidence of something called Trump derangement syndrome. Wouldn't you say, Pastor? I mean,
you're a really sick person because you're talking about people that had just experienced some traumatic experiences in their life in regard to the destruction of their homes, property, and even life.
Right.
And because of a political ideology, you're telling them not to get the help that they needed.
Right. It's true. Well, what we've heard from President Trump most recently is that he plans to bring a common sense approach back to the government. And what we have seen during the Biden administration is now the demise of an extreme Democrat Party. The Democrat Party has called folks who support Trump, the MAGA Republicans, extremists, extreme MAGA Republicans and stuff. But this last election has really, really demonstrated quite clearly what at least the vast majority of Americans are thinking and feeling. And if you look back at what went on during the Biden administration, how they disparaged Trump and how they disparaged all of Trump's policies and things that he put in place when he had his time in office, it's mind-boggling to see exactly what's going on. There are many things that the Democrats have supported and that Donald Trump opposes. And one of the big ones, and we've talked about it many times in this podcast, is basic national sovereignty through a strong border security. It's clear that millions of people have come in from all over the world and just walked across the border and have found themselves transported to various places around the country. And some of these legislators and officials in these states and cities have, given these illegal immigrants, places to live, credit cards with money on it. Not credit cards, more like debit cards, I guess you'd say, with cash on it to buy food
recently,
and whatnot.
May I interject something?
Of course.
Mayor Adams of New York City said that is going to stop very soon in New York City.
Could that have come about since the election of President Trump?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. National sovereignty through a strong border is something that Republicans have always defended and have always supported. And as to why the Democrats don't support that, why it was so allowed, think about Alejandro Mayorkas. And when we saw him on the news and they would say, do we have a strong border? Yes, we have a strong border. Everything is fine. Yet people were coming in by the thousands, just walking in. And we weren't even checking them to see who they were, from where they came from and what their intentions were in coming to this country. It's an interesting topic because I have relatives in my family. Actually, it's my wife and her daughter are trying to become citizens here in this country, and they've had to pay, a lot of money and filled out long applications and screened, with all kinds of intense questioning and things like that, just to become a permanent resident. It's crazy to think that millions have walked in and no questions asked. Just come on in, we'll pay your way, and everything's going to be fine. Why did the Democrats support that? And why do the Republicans stand against it? And the interesting thing is the election has sort of cleared up the answer. The vast majority of Americans don't think that that was a good idea. And now the big discussion in the news is Donald Trump's plan to have a massive deportation plan. And they're saying, well, this is racist, and this is a terrible idea, and he's going to separate families, children, and parents are going to be. They're saying every bad thing they can possibly say as Donald Trump takes office to try to, to straighten out the calamity that the Biden administration has created in this country. Another topic that the Democrats have supported and the Republicans have resisted is defunding of the police. Law and order in America has been lost. We've seen crime on the rise. You will see many on the left argue, oh, no, the crime is fine. It's not a problem and things like that.
Well, you know what? There was just a report out that in regard to crime statistics in the U.S.,
right,
where the FBI was saying that, overall crime is down, they skewed. Okay. Right. They did not give accurate information regarding that.
Sure. Well, what those who want to defund the police, excuse me, what they want to do is they want to replace police officers with counselors. So if there's an armed group of people holding up a bank or holding up something or doing something with weapons, then the counselors are going to come in and maybe just ask the questions and say, did you have a difficult time getting along with your father or your mother? I don't think those kind of things are going to work. You need the police, and those on the right, the extreme MAGA Republicans, they believe in law and order. And I think the election and Donald Trump's the victory in that election indicates that the vast majority of Americans want to see law and order return to this country, and we're not going to defund the police. Just a couple more quickly issues to touch on, and that is this idea of gender fluidity. Affirming gender transitioning procedures. Okay, now as Christians, we have a clear understanding as to why we don't think transgenderism is a legitimate way for somebody to lead their life. Yet, as Christians, we don't turn against these people with hatred. We're not judging them. We're not saying that they deserve to go to hell. We're not saying anything at all like that. But you can't affirm something that is clearly inhuman. It's not a human practice that is going to be successful in anyone's life for any length of time. So if you're going to affirm someone's right to transition their gender, that's fine. They have a right to do it. But to affirm it in a fashion that says it is normal and correct, and these people were just born in the wrong bodies and we're going to fix it, that's not common sense. And I think you'll see as Donald Trump takes office that he will prevent biological men from participating in women's sports. In situations where that has occurred, it has completely, made a mockery of the competitions that women have undergone. And we've seen it in the Olympic Games, and we've seen it at various levels at the college level and other places. Now, this is a small number of people. I've heard Democrats argue, this is a tiny number of people. This should not be a problem. Doesn't matter. I mean, if you're going to ruin a small number of women's lives and prevent them from getting the scholarships that they would like to have and deserve to have because of their athletic ability, then it's an issue that really needs to be addressed.
And also, there's the other aspect of it. Okay, you have transgender women, or really males, participating in women's athletics and sports, and women are getting injured.
Sure.
And sometimes seriously injured.
Sure.
All right, in the games.
It's common sense. It's common sense. And I loved it when I heard President Trump use that term. We're going to bring common sense back into our government. The last issue is the Democrats wanted to try to solve problems in this country by spending money. And one of the biggest things they tried to get going was the thing called the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal was intended to transform the economy and to tackle the issues of inequality of income and climate change in the country here. The goals of the Green New Deal, technically, I was reading about the Green New Deal. Some of the goals are reasonable. Some of the things they want to accomplish are reasonable and understandable. But to throw billions of dollars at it and compel everybody to drive electric cars, which is a good technology, but it's not a technology that's going to be able to replace fossil fueled vehicles yet at this time. It's just not going to work. Compel people to buy electric cars. Supposedly the Green New Deal will create lots of new jobs, and people are going to be able to get a job replacing lead pipes in the ground. Sounds great. And that would be great for all those Yale and Harvard graduates to get out there and start replacing some lead pipes. They also want to weatherize homes and buildings, and they want to manufacture wind turbines, which have shown signs of not being a great technology. And not only do they kill birds in the air, but these wind turbines, they wear out quick and they crash in the ocean. As a matter of fact, it's harming the environment in regards to the whales in the ocean, things like that. But also you can get a job building solar panels, another fun job. Anyway, one of the biggest goals, though, of the Green New Deal was to redistribute wealth from the wealthy to the poor, which is a tenet of a socialist form of government. In other words, it's not fair that anyone should be rich and then someone else should be poor. We need to take from the rich, give to the poor. And that, I think, is really at the foundation of the Green New Deal. And these are the things that the Democrats wanted to bring to pass in our country. And the vast majority of Americans said, no deal. We're not interested in that. It's not going to work. And they brought in a president who will take the Oval Office in January, who is going to try to steer things in a better direction. Now, once again here, this is the podcast for Christians United for God and Country and the United States Prayer Force. We're not advocating for a political ideology, although what we are doing is making observations about America. We're making observations. And based on those observations, we're praying for this country. We believe that all the prayers that have been lifted up before the election, we've seen some answers to those prayers. We're seeing people who have cockamamie ideas about how government should run being removed from office. And we're seeing a president who has a common sense approach and a more traditional American approach, who will take office very soon. And that's just something we've noticed. If you have any comments and questions and things, you can get in touch with us. Just send us an email right now, christiansunited50@gmail.com. That's christiansunited50 for the 50 states of America @gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. You can disagree with us. You can support us. You can do what you want. We're happy to have you listening. Pastor, and we know you have something interesting to tell us about that you've done some research on.
Yes, I want to start out by talking about fascism, and you made some allusion, in regard to, what has been going on with Donald Trump. But I want to not only speak about it here for a little bit, but where it ultimately seeks to lead our country. But let me start out by giving you a definition of fascism. This is by, dictionary definition. It says a system of government characterized by rigid one-party dictatorship. And, the Democrats talk a lot about democracy, but in regard to what you were speaking about a little while ago, the purpose of allowing all these illegal aliens into the United States and to give them all these benefits, all right, them not being citizens of our country, is ultimately to, make them citizens. And by allowing millions of them to come in and giving them all these benefits, ultimately they would vote Democratic and remain, the Democrats would remain the one-party system here in the country. That's why you have, certain states like California. The Democrats have completely taken over California. They've completely taken over, New York State. In some respects, they've completely taken over our own state, Connecticut.
Yes.
But that's what fascism is defined as being, a rigid one-party dictatorship, forcible suppression of opposition. All right. Now, they're calling Republicans and those who supported Donald Trump fascists, but again, forcible suppression of the opposition. There's a thing now that you're hearing a lot about. It's called lawfare. All right. Yes. Where people who are in opposition, let's say, to something that the Democrats are for, all right, they've done with the Department of Justice and, Merrick Garland, they arrest people. They put people like women's groups, mothers groups that are just wanting to have a common sense approach in regard to the books that are put in schools. They're put on a terrorist watch list, so forth and so on. Right. Some Catholics, organizations have been put on a terrorist watch list. What's that all about? All right, that sounds to me like fascism. All right,
weaponization of the system,
forcible suppression of opposition. And then private economic enterprise under centralized governmental control. I'll say that again. All right. Private economic enterprise under central governmental control, controlling business. You kind of spoke about it, yes. Electric cars, and they were going to bring that to pass. I guess there were some dates as a 2034 or something like that, 2035,
Yes. Quick interjection. Isn't what Kamala Harris had planned to do to address price gouging?
Yes.
She wanted to be able to control what businesses could charge for their products, whether it be food or gasoline, clothing. That fits right in with what you're talking about right there.
The Democrats, in regard to those beginning definitions of what fascism is, they get the tag put on them. Now, the next thing is, and this is the thing they accused, Republicans of and Donald Trump of, belligerent nationalism. And here's another thing, racism and militarism. Right. And so that's what fascism is. And as you can see, that to some extent, the Democrats fit the bill in regard to this definition more so, excuse me, than the Republicans. Now, you've heard of this organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
Yes.
Now, that organization began in 1957. It was headed up by Martin Luther King and some other, Black clergymen from the South. And the purpose of that organization was to coordinate, groups and peoples throughout the South in the struggle for the civil rights movement in regard to Black Americans. However, here's what a lot of people don't understand. And I got some of this information from a book. I think we've mentioned it on a previous podcast. It's called The Iron Triangle.
Right.
It's written by a Black man who is a Christian. and he gives the information. He's got the information. In regard to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, he brings out the fact that back in the 1960s, all right, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was infiltrated by American communists. Okay. And their intent in infiltrating that organization, as you know, Black Americans were struggling for their civil rights, and they, got into this group, was to propagate communist ideology in America through the civil rights movement. Okay. That was their intent. Okay. And they have been successful in that. What began in the 60s has evolved into what we could call democratic socialism.
Right.
Okay.
Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. Bernie Sanders, AOC. Okay. Tim Walz, Kamala Harris. All right. And this was the ideology and philosophy, all right, of government, democratic socialism. And you understand by looking at the things that they adhere to and stand for, they are anti-capitalism because they are socialists. Now, they want to control everything under a democratic guise, but you see, making people believe that you're voting for this and this is what you want, so forth and so on. But it's really them, all right, the leadership, all right, controlling everything in regard to government, so forth and so on.
And isn't there disdain for capitalism because certain people can work hard and be clever and effective and entrepreneurial and get wealthy, whereas other people don't do that.
And that's where the antithesis,
inequity,
the antithesis of what you just mentioned is DEI, diversity,
equity,
and inclusion. Okay. And so, no longer is an individual going to be judged, all right, as an individual, but now it's the group.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. But that's what democratic socialism stands for. They're anti-capitalism. They are they're anti-Americanism. Because in their philosophy and their idea that, America was founded by a bunch of racist white men.
Right.
You see, from the very get-go. They're anti-Americanism, they're anti-God, they're anti-Bible for the things that they stand for, and they're anti-Christ. Now, this ideology that Americans voted against in this recent presidential election, all right, but it is the ideology of now what appears to be almost half of the American population, all right? They've embraced this. And what the thing that I want you to realize is this in regard to this democratic socialism. This is the ideology that will ultimately usher in the Antichrist and the one world government from the revived Roman Empire when the tribulation period begins and the rapture, after the rapture takes place. Right. But that's the thing that's going to prevail, or they're seeking to have prevail. Now, when the Christians are taken out of this world in the rapture, then they'll just be able to, take over everything. But that's the ideal. That's what they're pushing for.
Right.
And, it's really, as I said, it's everything that this country was founded upon and the biblical principles that this country was founded on. It is against all of it. Okay. And they propagate that false narrative by just calling the opposition all kinds of names.
That's right.
Fascists, Nazis. Hitler, Nazis, so forth and so on. When in reality, that they're not.
Right.
Now.
It's propaganda.
Yes, that's all it is. And, some people have embraced this to such an extent that, that in recent days in some college campuses that they're having to have bereavement time, and these college students that they're so distraught now that Kamala Harris did not win the election. This is real. You would think,
it sounds ridiculous.
That they're having these days off from school, and students can, if they need to, they can miss class. Yeah. And they're having actually days when they're giving these college students cookies
and Legos,
milk, Legos, yes, coloring books.
No way.
Yes,
no
coloring books with crayons so that they can do all this stuff.
College level students.
College
because they're
level
so
students.
Distraught.
Yes, because they're so distraught that Donald Trump is the president, and
they should go to their civics class and learn a little bit about America before. Okay, continue.
Anyways, But how are you going to have a great country when you have people that are young adults acting like little children?
They called them snowflakes, if you remember, not too long ago. Yeah. I don't know why, because they melt so easily, I guess.
And as you mentioned when we began, I want to talk a little bit about Grover Cleveland.
Grover Cleveland.
Okay. In regard to, he served 2 terms as president, and until this past election, when Donald Trump now has become, who served as the 45th president, and then as the now going to serve as the 47th president. Yes. He was the first president to ever have served 2 terms in the presidency, separated by 4
one
years.
In the middle.
By one in the middle.
Is Grover Cleveland, was he a Republican or a Democrat?
No, in fact, here's the thing about Grover Cleveland. He is the first Democrat to be elected president after the Civil War.
Okay.
So right. He was a Democrat. However, he was a very conservative.
Democratic principles were much different back then than they are today.
The Democrats of way back then.
Yes.
Okay. Now, even though before, the Civil War, and he was from New York, by the way. Okay. He was born in Caldwell, New Jersey, and but his family moved to New York. He was the son of a Presbyterian preacher, and in fact, his first name is not Grover. Okay, that's his middle name.
That sounds like the name of his dog.
Okay, his first name is really Stephen. Stephen Grover Cleveland.
Okay, great.
All right, and his first term in office, he was the 22nd president, all right, of the United States. He was elected in 1884, so served until, 1888, when the next election was, into 1889. And then he was elected as the 24th president in 1892, when he served till 1896. And so his 2 terms were separated by the presidency of Benjamin Harrison, who was the 23rd president of the United States.
Was he the Joe Biden of his time? Just curious.
You talking about Grover Cleveland or Benjamin Harrison?
Harrison, because he was in the middle between Grover's 2 terms of office. He must have been a lousy president. But anyway, go ahead.
All right. As I said, he was actually born Stephen Grover Cleveland. In fact, his father at that time was pastoring a Presbyterian church in New Jersey, and Grover Cleveland was named, his father, I believe, his name was Richard, but he was named Stephen because that was the name of the pastor, the first pastor of the church that his father was now pastoring.
I see.
He was born in Caldwell, New Jersey, and he was raised in upstate New York. And, another first in regard to Grover Cleveland, was that he's the only president to be married in the White House. All right. And, he's the only the second president to be wed and be married while he was serving as president.
Okay.
And when he was elected to the presidency, and he was 47 years of age. And 2 years later, at age 49, he got married. And his wife's name was Frances Folsom, actually taking his last name, Cleveland.
Right.
And she was 28 years his junior.
Good Lord.
She was only 21 years of age when they got married. And she's the youngest first lady to ever serve.
She was about 21?
She was 21 when they got married. She's the youngest woman to ever serve as first lady. And she, still holds that honor. I don't think you'd have many 21-year-olds today in the day and time which we live being able to serve.
Not unless they brought their milk and cookies and Legos, they might be able to survive.
And together, Grover Cleveland and his wife had 5 children. And their first child, Ruth, was born in 1891, and she died in 1904. In fact, she never really got that. She was 12 years of age when she died. And she contracted there was a deadly disease back in those years called diphtheria.
Yeah.
And she contracted diphtheria on January 2nd of 1904, and she died 5 days later. Now, here's another interesting fact. Many of us are old enough. I mean, I don't buy them anymore, but I think you'd still find them in the stores. All right. Did you ever buy eat a candy bar called Baby Ruth?
Used to get it at Halloween in the bag. I used to separate them. I didn't like them.
But the Curtis Candy Company claims that name, Baby Ruth, all right, that they had there on their candy bar was named after Grover Cleveland's daughter who passed away.
Oh,
okay.
I see.
And now, Grover Cleveland, although a son of a Presbyterian preacher, and his father was very devout, did missions work and pastored and everything else. When he got into his adulthood, he did stray from the faith, and he did father a child out of wedlock. Okay, and that came up. Okay.
Yep.
When he was running for president.
I can see that it would. Yeah.
Okay. And you know what he said? And you got to give him credit for this. He told those people that were, his advisors and handlers and so forth, whatever they referred to him as, he said, just tell the truth.
Okay.
Didn't try to hide it. Didn't try to hide it. Yep. Didn't try to, cover it up. He said, just tell the truth.
Right.
And he was ultimately elected, as I said, as president of the United States.
Gotcha.
But it seems like in his, later years, as he became president, maybe before, he did return, to the faith of his father and his mother.
That's nice.
Okay. And I'm going to just read to you a couple of statements, some quotations that Grover Cleveland made on Christianity and the American Republic, because that's what we've been talking about.
Oh yeah.
Okay. The effect, all right, that Christianity has had on this country, all right, that we call America. And what you have now is a present generation of politicians who want to turn it to something that it was never intended to be.
Sure.
All right. Here's what Grover Cleveland said in regard to this. He says, I was reared and taught in the strictest school of Presbyterianism. He says, I remember well the precious precepts and examples of my early days, and I acknowledge that to them I owe every faculty of usefulness I possess and every just apprehension of duties and obligations of life. The attendance upon church service 3 times each Sunday and upon Sabbath school during the noon intermission may be irksome to a boy of 10 or 12 years of age to be well fixed in his memory, but I have never known a man who regretted these things in the years of his maturity. You see.
Gotcha.
And then he says, another statement here, all must admit that the reception of the teachings of Christianity result in the purest patriotism, in the most scrupulous fidelity to public trust, and the best type of citizenship.
Yes.
And then, in essence, in that statement, he's saying, you know what? You want to have patriotic Americans?
Yeah.
Devout Christians make good Americans and patriotic Americans.
Sure.
Okay. Another statement. He says, we have been too much in the habit of regarding Christian institutions, talking about church, schools, so forth and so on, as entirely disconnected from any considerations of municipal growth or prosperity. In other words, in that statement, he's kind of saying, people try to divorce the two.
Yes.
Their practice of, their faith and, being businessmen, so forth and so on. But he goes on and he says this, the citizen is a better businessman if he is a Christian gentleman, and surely business is not the less prosperous and successful if conducted on Christian principles. When we consider the difference as a member of the community between the young man who, under the influence of such an association, has learned his duty to his fellows and to the state, and that one who, subject to no moral restraint, yields to temptation and thus becomes vicious and criminal, the importance of an institution among us which leads our youth and our young men in the way of morality and good citizenship must be freely admitted.
Yeah.
So he understood that. Christians make good citizens. Christians make good America and Americans. And the reason why we are in such a dire strait in regard to some of the things that are going on in our country is because they've removed Christianity from in people's lives in regard to school and so forth and so on.
Sure.
And they have no moral standards.
And it starts with the children. It starts at the youngest of ages.
Yes.
When they took prayer out of the schools back in the 60s, that was kind of the beginning of the undoing of the restraints that Christianity brings into the lives of people growing up for moral purposes. And look at where morality has gone now.
Right. And that's the reason why we're in such a mess with crime and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
Because people have not been taught from childhood,
right,
you see,
right,
godly moral principles on how to conduct their lives and what's the difference between right and wrong and good and evil. And that's why you have people in government, all right, who are, even though they've been elected to office, all right, they're wicked and they're ungodly.
Yeah, it happens.
Now, I'm going to give you another, he's going to talk about the home here in this next statement that I have for you. And in regard to this next statement, he's going to say some things about polygamy because, his term ended technically, in 1896, going into 1897.
Yeah.
All right. But at that time, in the year 1896, Utah, which was at that time a territory, became a state. And, Utah, the state of Utah, the territory of Utah was founded by Mormons.
Right.
And at that time, before their statehood, all right, the Mormons practiced polygamy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they were not going to be allowed into the statehood of the United States unless that stopped. And so they stopped it.
Right.
All right. But he's going to make some statements here about the family. But, he's going to say some things about polygamy also. He says the strength, the perpetuity, and the destiny of a nation rests upon our homes. See, that's why the devil is so against the family. He wants to destroy the home, because you destroy the home, you destroy the nation. The strength, the perpetuity, and the destiny of our nation rests upon our homes, established by the law of God, guarded by parental care, regulated by parental authority, and sanctified by parental love. These are not the homes of polygamy. He says, then he talks about the mothers. He says, the mothers of our land who rule the nation as they mold the characters and guide the actions of their sons, live according to God's holy ordinances, and each secure and happy in the exclusive love of the father of her children, sheds the warm light of true womanhood, unperverted and unpolluted, upon all within her pure and wholesome family circle. These are not the cheerless, crushed, unwomanly mothers of polygamy. And he would, I don't have a statement here, but I read it, that, he would claim that the strength of his youth, that he had, was because of his mother's prayers.
Mm-hmm.
His mother was a godly woman, a preacher's wife. And then he goes on, he talks about fathers. You see, and that's why you have the destruction of our society, because there's the destruction of the home. All the time now, you read, all right, in the news about women who are killing their children.
Right.
And that's, I'm sure, yes, wickedness has always gone on, but not like it is going on now.
No.
Okay. Then he talks about the fathers here. He says, the fathers of our families are the best citizens of the republic. Wife and children are the sources of patriotism, and conjugal and parental affection beget devotion to the country. The man who, undefiled with plural marriage, is surrounded in his single home with his wife and children, has a stake in the country, which inspires him with respect for its laws and courage for its defense. These are not the fathers of polygamous families. But just wanting to realize, he was raised in a Christian home.
Yes.
And the influence of Christianity, he really, like I said, his oldest daughter, Ruth, died when she was 12 years of age. And that really caused him a lot of grief. Mm-hmm. But he found comfort and solace in the Bible.
Right.
And he found comfort from his preacher. And so you see the work of Christianity in the hearts of the men that led this country,
right,
and why America was great. And you see what's going on now in regard to our country. You don't have the Democrats talking about God.
No.
Talking about Jesus Christ or anything like that. It's all about things that, as we look in the Bible, we find are unscriptural and wrong in
Yeah.
regard to things that people ought to do. But that's their intent, to bring about, as we said, a democratic, socialist country.
Right.
All right. And to fall in line with the rest of Europe. So ultimately, when the Antichrist comes on the scene, he can take over the entire world.
It's interesting that you should bring up Grover Cleveland, because I see some parallels between him and President Trump, not simply the fact that they've had, or they're going to have, 2 terms in office separated by one in the middle, but Grover Cleveland obviously fell to some temptations as a younger man.
Yes.
He was a sinful man.
Yes.
Donald Trump, you look at his history, he fell to many temptations. He was a sinful man.
And they were both Presbyterians.
Seriously?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Donald Trump's mother came from Scotland.
Yeah.
Okay. And this was right after the Second World War. A great revival broke out in the Hebrides Islands.
Okay.
Which is in the northern part of Scotland.
Right.
And she was living in the Hebrides Islands when this revival broke out, and she ultimately immigrated to the United States.
Right.
And if you ask Donald Trump, in his earlier life, what was his religion, he would say, I'm a Presbyterian.
Sure. My point is that good men and good women, Christians, oftentimes have evidence in their lives that they have weakness, that they are sinful at certain times in their life. It's funny when people simply say, oh, you think you're holier than I. You think you're better than us because you're a Christian. We don't. We just recognize the fact that we're all sinners. We're all weak. We all fall to temptations, whether those temptations are for greed or for lust or for other kinds of things. We're all susceptible to those things. And Donald Trump was just as susceptible. And in his case, he had the resources, the funds to commit sins a little more in a more elaborate way than you and I have had and a lot of other people. So people don't understand Christianity. They really don't. And it's interesting that you should bring up Grover Cleveland, because I see a lot of similarities between him and Donald Trump. And Donald Trump now has confessed to his renewed Christian life when he was the target of an assassin's bullet and hit in the side of his ear. At the moment when he stood up and he's raised his fist and said, fight, 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 he had some courage in him. But he also had an awakening, and he knew that God had protected him for something. And I think, like I said, we can't say for sure, but it looks like God has protected him to perhaps take the reins of America for another 4 years and try to bring it back to common sense. Bring it back to common sense, decency, law and order, sovereignty, a sovereign country, America, the greatest country and the greatest form of government to be on the face of the earth. Is it perfect? No. Was it perfect? No. There was a lot of bad things that happened. There was a lot of sin that occurred in young America. There was slavery, a horrible blight on the history of this country. We know that.
Yeah, but here's another thing. And no one's making excuse for that.
Right. No.
Okay.
No, not at all.
All right. But slavery was not an American thing. That was
throughout history.
Yes, throughout history.
Oh, and every country you can think of, slavery was. People think it's like white people in America created slavery. That's not true. It's not true. As a matter of fact, a lot of white people were enslaved throughout history if you look at various countries. So anyway, maybe we're going off target here, but
and another thing, we talked about this in regard to that thing we talked about in lawfare.
Yeah.
Okay, now that Trump has become the next president, or going to become the next president, all right, the federal charges against him, led by that individual by the name of Jack Smith.
Yeah.
All right. Seems like all those charges are going to be dropped.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what?
And the state charges against Donald Trump, I think they're going in New York State. Those are going to fade away also.
Right.
So, but that's not what we want. We don't want our government weaponized. All right. Even against the people that we don't agree with in regard to ideology.
Right.
That is wrong. And that's what was going on in these last 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration.
Yeah. I've been watching Donald Trump's life, for the past several years here, and I've often said, and I've often wondered, and I still believe this, that no weapon formed against him shall prosper. And I can't say that. I don't know what's going to happen in his future, but there's a lot of weapons that have been sent in the direction of Donald Trump to take him out, to kill him, to put him in jail, to castigate his character and call him an immoral horrible man that should be removed. He's not suitable. He's not fit to be president of this great country. God has plans. God can use sinful men. David, the king of Israel of the Bible, was a sinful man.
Mm-hmm.
Moses was a sinful man. They were all sinful people at various points. Peter denied Christ, at the most vulnerable period of Christ on his way to his crucifixion. Just think of the thing. People don't understand Christianity. They don't understand the Bible, and they don't see the relevance of the Bible and the foundations of this country.
And, okay, the world, I'm talking about lost men.
Yeah.
Okay, they have an unforgiving spirit.
That's right.
Okay, someone could have done something 30 years ago. Okay, you'll hear, even in regard to sometimes a politician now. Okay, guy might be in his 40s or 50s, and they'll say, oh, you know what? When he was in college, he went to a party and he put on blackface. So what?
I know, really.
Okay, he was in college.
Right. He wasn't trying to disparage black people. No, it's. I'm almost speechless sometimes when I think of the way people behave and the way they treat each other. It's ridiculous. But we're running out of time, Pastor. We've got to wrap it up here. Folks, if you're interested in joining the United States Prayer Force, join us in Prayer for America. We're going to need it going forward. Please head over to the website, ChristiansUnited50.com. There is a place there where you can sign up for the Prayer Force. We're not, trying to get information out of you, and we're not going to bombard you with marketing materials. We just want to know that you're praying for this country. We want to provide materials and information and this podcast to help us identify ways, means, and reasons we can pray for America. And while you're there, yes, if you can make a donation to help keep us going, keep us on the air, please do so. Send something in the mail to Christians United, P.O. Box 2275, Stamford, Connecticut 06906. Or get to that website, ChristiansUnited50.com. There is a donate page there where you can make a donation to the organization as quickly as possible. Every dollar we receive will be spent responsibly, and none of it goes into my pocket or pastor's pocket. That's the way we're going to operate, and that's just the way it's going to be. Pastor, final word. What can these Americans do as we get closer to a change of power in our government?
Well, while many of us may rejoice in the fact that there seems to be a change in this administration and the direction that this country has been going,
yes,
and now we're looking at it, maybe moving in a direction for the better, we have to realize that the Lord's coming back. We don't have a lot of time before Jesus Christ returns, and don't think that the opposition is not going to seek to rise up to try to stop any good thing from taking place. They're going to fight as they've never fought before.
They're even saying that they are.
Yes,
they're saying.
And so we need to be vigilant. We need to pray. We need to continue to pray and be vigilant in prayer, praying for the leadership of our country, praying that Donald Trump will put the right people in the offices that need to be filled.
Correct.
And that this country can go in the right direction, not just politically, but America needs help spiritually. And so pray for revival, pray that souls will be saved, and that a multitude in these next few years would enter into the kingdom of God.
Amen.
All right, through the testimony and the witness of devout, faithful Christians.
Right. And if you'd like to take issue with anything you're hearing on this podcast, get in touch with us, ChristiansUnited50@gmail.com. We'd love to have a conversation with you. And we're just glad you're here today listening and watching. We'll be back again next week for some more discussion about America and how we're going to pray to keep America safe and sound. Thanks for watching.